Now, I spoke with Britain's former top spy chief about the Gaza visa issue. The world-famous former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, says that if he were in charge of our national security, his strong advice would be to stop any Gazans arriving from the terrorist-controlled hotspot, at least until security vetting is possible. Now, Sir Richard held the role informally known as C from 1999 to 2004. Here's what he had to say. In your former role, would you have been worried about social cohesion issues and rising anti-Semitism by bringing in literally thousands of people from Gaza when you look at their own government's hatred of Israel, which they want to wipe off the map?
Yeah, it's a shocking and it's a complex issue. And I think the problem that we're seeing is the exploitation of the Palestinians by Hamas. I mean, Hamas's attitude to the Palestinians has been entirely cynical. And, they have created a conflict where the civilian population is a shield. And, they have mixed combatants and civilians. So there's no separation in this war. And the Palestinians have suffered dreadfully. And we all, I think, feel that concern and that sympathy, which has turned, into an extreme situation. I think the danger that you mention in relation to Australia, and I'm not informed of the detail, is amongst some of those people coming into Australia, there I would imagine, not just be Hamas sympathizers, but the possibility that there are Hamas activists as well. And there's no question that Iran, will be exploiting these opportunities. I mean, they have a very active intelligence organization, which has a long history, in my view, of supporting terrorist movements. So, yes, there is a danger in this sort of infiltration of the Palestinian diaspora. And, as it were, the fact that the Palestinians are victims of this crisis is an entirely cynical situation. And in my view, people don't explain sufficiently the extent to which Hamas built themselves militarily inside the Palestinian population so that the Palestinians would suffer massively if they were attacked. And that's just what's happened.
Yeah, the death toll, the suffering of their own people is part of their absurd military strategy against Israel. It's horrific, and it's one of the many reasons why they need to be removed as the governing body in Gaza. But Sir Richard, I'm intrigued by the comment you just made when you said Iran has a very sophisticated intelligence and they would be looking to infiltrate. They'd be looking for opportunities like this. What do you mean? How would that work?
Well, the IRGC, which is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is, part of, it's the primary intelligence organization in Iran. Wherever there is an indigenous Iranian community, they will reach into it. Wherever there are communities that maybe are sympathizers towards the theocracy in Iran, they will be exploiting that situation. And I think there's no question that, Australia, it may seem very distant from the Middle East, is to an extent inevitably involved in this situation. So, we've seen. I mean, I remember when I was chief, this is way back, warning, when Alexander Downer was foreign minister, saying to Alexander, look, you're not going to avoid this terrorist problem because of, the composition of the ethnic composition of your immigrant communities. And they will be influenced, they will be affected, and there will be individuals who will get sucked into terrorism. That's just what's happened. And I think the risk continues, particularly when the background is like the crisis currently in Gaza, which is extreme and, is going to influence all of our communities that are affected by the reverberations of this war and, this really ghastly conflict.
Is your advice, therefore, that there needs to be even more rigorous screening of a country's immigration intake from certain parts of the world? So right now, the front line of a war zone in Gaza, where it is controlled by a terrorist regime. Are you saying that there should be much more rigorous security screening, or do you think that it's just so difficult to ascertain if there is a security risk that perhaps it's better to pause, which is what our opposition leader has suggested here, to pause immigration?
Well, I think if I were responsible, my advice would be the same, and to pause it. But look, on the other hand, ASIO is a pretty efficient organisation that I've been certainly impressed by. You know, it knows what it's doing. But I would have thought that they need to be extremely careful in allowing these people in without some sort of security screening, without some investigation as to who's coming in, you know, where they are, what they're doing, what their connections are. I mean, it just seems to me like a very basic issue. And I would have thought, given the terrorist problems that you've had in Australia, you know, which have been notable over the last 10 to 15 years, that people should be very, very careful about this. You know, otherwise you're going to import a problem which, you know, could be difficult.
Yeah, this is why it's been one of the biggest political issues, well, the biggest political issue of the past fortnight here in Australia in our parliament. But just to clarify, Sir Richard, at the start of that last answer, you said your advice would be to pause it. Is that right? If
you can't trace and you can't vet these people before they come in, I would, I personally would have advised to wait until one is in a stronger position to do that. I mean, there's so much uncertainty at the moment. But I guess, you know, what the other side of the argument is there's a humanitarian argument. And you've got to balance those two sides. I mean, I come from a security and intelligence background, and obviously I would put that as a primary issue. I put the humanitarian issue second, but then others will certainly disagree with me.
The head of ASIO, the Director General of ASIO, said 2 weeks ago, which is what sparked this entire political debate here in Australia, he said that rhetorical support for Hamas would not alone be a reason to exclude someone from Gaza for getting a visa to enter Australia. So he said rhetorical support for Hamas as opposed to ideological support would not prevent someone from getting a visa to enter Australia. That has sparked a lot of confusion and concern in the community. What do you think of a comment like that someone could express rhetorical support for a listed terror organisation, which Hamas is, and still be allowed into a country like Australia?
Well, it's very hard to make a distinction between rhetorical support and something more profound. Look, all of us, I'm thinking about the UK, we've been shocked by the extent to which there's sort of apparently militant rhetorical support on the streets for Hamas during the current crisis. And it's worrying and concerning. And there's no question that amongst that group, there are going to be people who I think are radicalized. That's the danger. Radicalized individuals. I'm not necessarily suggesting that the Iranians or Hamas are going to import organized terrorist groups into Australia, but there will be lone wolves who, and I mean, that's one of the characteristics of recent terrorist attacks, the activities. Look at this recent stabbing in Germany. It's clearly a lone wolf attack, killing 3 people in a provincial German city. I mean, that's the sort of problem that is being faced. And I think inevitably, Australia isn't going to be immune from that. Why should anybody think you're sort of isolated from that risk? And this is a very volatile period politically very volatile indeed when one is looking at anything to do with the Middle East.
Well, that incident you mentioned, the German music festival, again, that it's been reported that Islamic terror was at least the ideology behind that individual. It's also been reported that he was seeking or is seeking refugee status. So, you know, do you think the left are blind to some of these issues, that they see a refugee and they can't believe that that person could be influenced or radicalised or driven by ISIS?
But we've had a stack of examples across Europe where, you know, individuals, supposedly genuine refugees, have been radicalised and have reacted, you know, in a violent and inexplicable fashion. It's a high risk at the moment. And I would have thought that this is a risk that has to be taken account of in protecting, you know, the safety of one's own citizens, and that applies in Australia as well. I just think it's a very difficult issue, but I would urge caution, and I would urge restraint rather than throwing open the doors and letting anybody in.
All right, Sir Richard, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to hear your insights. Really appreciate your time once again.
Sharri, very nice talking with you again. All the best.
So that's a big intervention in the Gaza visa debate by Sir Richard Dearlove.